Yo. Okay, so I'm back again for today's spiel chat. Yesterday the delivery man interrupted my second um, upload, and I had to get the door, and by that point I'd completely lost my train of thought. Um, Consequentially, I had to re-listen to the last video. I didn't enjoy that. Let's be honest. It was terrible. I haven't been doing it. Um, it's not like singing. I don't have to apply any quality control. Really, I mean, it's just blurting out stuff as I think it, and it's ruminations. That's what it is. Yeah, I'm ruminating. I'm expressing stuff. I'm trying not to pontificate. I'm trying really hard not to do that. But it's kind of implied in the description, isn't it? Really. But anyway, yeah. So I had to listen to it back, and so it was a lot of coughing, a lot of umming and ahhing, and yeah, it sounds like shit. I don't know what I'm fucking talking about. But apart from that, so what? Um, what you gonna do? Uh, Ding dong, knock at the door. It's the police because I've said something wrong. But no. But anyway, yeah. So I listened to it back, and so I'm gonna try and course correct, put the train back on the track, and carry on what I was ruminating on. Actually, is ruminating something you do out loud, or is that something you do like inside your own head? I'm not quite sure. Ruminate. Can you ruminate in speech? I don't know. Probably not. But dictionary. Um, anyway, so I was getting on the subject in the last clip of the UK in particular, where I live and what I know well, and I was whoa. Sorry about that. I was asking the question: why are we losing our rights, like our liberties, our civil rights, our freedoms, in the UK? Why are they becoming lost? And I've got my own opinions why exactly this is, but more to the point, um, I want to try and address what I think, in my very humble opinion, that's not so humble, but it is opinionated. I want to try and address the root of this, or some of the roots of this, as I perceive them. Because people talk. I watch and listen loads of podcasts, loads of op-eds. Lots of column inches about people talking about the pandemic, COVID. They say, oh, we lost so many of our rights under COVID. Well, and we did. We lost our right to congregate, to socialize, to travel, to breathe the air freely. No, I mean, we did lose a lot of rights. We lost the right to attend funerals, go to hospitals, just you name it. We lost so many rights. But we've got some of them back again, haven't we? I mean, we've got them back on the proviso that they could be taken away again at any point. But people point to that, but it's nothing really. It's the rot started many years before that. I mean, if you talk about freedom of speech in particular, then you've only got to go back to what the early millennium, the Malicious Communications Act, anti-terrorism laws in this country that governments sort of introduced without asking anybody. They introduced them on the back of 7/7 bombings, and obviously 9/11 in America, and the hate preacher pandemic, the Islamic hate preacher pandemic in the UK, and those kind of things. So that they kind of these laws were written. These laws were written with a modicum of public support, I suppose, but not universal public support or even widespread public support. These laws were written as a knee-jerk reaction to terrorism and terrorist-style activities that happened, and crimes in the UK. But really, go back 10 years before that. Go back another 10 years. Go back to 1997. So what happened in 1997? Well, what happened? There was a whole fiasco, as we know now. The British Broadcasting Corporation lied to the entire country on the pretext that Princess Diana was the estranged partner of the Prince of Wales, the King to be Charles, was out there being a danger to the UK, or rather, or not so much an embarrassment, but a problem, being a problem for the UK institution, the monarchy, the government, and the people by extension, and therefore people at the British Broadcasting Corporation. We know some of the names now. Obviously Bashir. Used a lot of CIA style tactics, or underhand espionage, spy tactics, to manufacture a situation whereby that woman, Diana Spencer, was basically cornered, or coerced, or blackmailed, or fooled, whatever, entrapped, use whatever term you like, into spouting a lot of stuff about the institutions, the monarchies, everything about her life, basically, and what her feelings, right? And this is very important. A lot of that discussion was centered on what were Diana's feelings about what was happening to her. I mean, she didn't provide any hard facts, evidence. It was mostly centered around her perception of what was being done and what was being done to her, and who was trying to corral her and control her and restrict her, restrict what she did, with the landmines thing and the AIDS things that she did, the causes that she wanted to promote, and then obviously what she did in her private life, who she socialized with and liaised with and had affairs with, and all after very shortly after separating from Charles. And because of course she's the guardian, the mother of the two princes, William, Harry, institutionally very important figures for the future of the monarchy. Well, as it transpires, one is, the other not so much. But less said about Harry the better. I mean, I think everyone's hoping he can snap out of it and ditch that fucking nightmare of a wife. Oh god, yeah. Anyway, I don't see it lasting, but then in a perverse sort of way, maybe it will last. You never know. You just never know. But anyway, back onto that. So yeah, so in 1997. Anyway, shortly after. I mean, I think Diana was very paranoid, and she might have had very good reason to be paranoid. Maybe they were out together. We'll probably never know. But they were certainly eager to rein her in, compartmentalize her, so she became less of a talking point. Because you can't she was a loose cannon really by that point, and and the media, they were all over it, of course, obviously, and they had their own narratives, and obviously the BBC had its own agenda, typically an anti-monarchist agenda, typically. The BBC, as I've said before, populated by lefties, Republicans, not Republicans as in the American party, Republicans as in they're not monarchy. They want to bring down the monarchy or end it because they're commies. Well, they're socialists. They've got no love for the royal family. Most of the people at the BBC. Sorry. So they had an agenda, or rather, people working on certain certain production companies would definitely have an agenda. And they were serving that agenda, obviously, through their mouthpieces, people like Bashir. Anyway, but at the end of the day, shortly after that interview, the accident in Paris. So Princess Diana's no more. She's dead. And we've seen endless narratives spun around that one. How she died. Did anyone cause it, i.e., constructively? Was it planned that they would try and kill her, or all these kind of things? And from the wild conspiracy theory of it was Prince Charles that ordered a hit, and to the mundane explanation, which is a driver under the influence slightly was traveling at high speeds and in a tunnel, chased by high performance paparazzi cars. What can you say? A tragic accident, but could have been prevented. Certainly, a lot of things. A chain of things had to go wrong in order for that accident to occur, and they did go wrong. But I don't think you can realistically say that, well, it was a set of events that fit perfectly into place by design. No, I don't buy it. It was an accident. It might have been a 1 in 100 accident, or even 1 in 1,000 accident, but nevertheless, it was an accident that occurred, and a tragedy. The nation lost a sort of, what's the word? Well, how could you describe her? I suppose a sympathetic figurehead, I suppose you could say. A lot of people had a lot of time for Princess Diana. I'm not so sure myself. She was a bit of a she was obviously damaged. She was obviously very sad. Also a bit narcissistic. She liked attention. Went on her terms. Obviously, she liked it. She also liked to play roles. But she was a people pleaser. And she was a do-gooder because it probably made her feel really good. Like she was giving something back. She also probably felt a bit like, had a bit of an inferiority complex. Yeah, sure, she was the daughter of a lord. So, she was aristocracy. But, marrying into the royal family, marrying a man who is 12, 15 years older than her, all these things. I need to watch The Crown or something because I forgot all my facts from back in the 80s. But yeah, so she had all these problems, yeah, but there was still a large proportion of the country who were enamored of Princess Diana, and she sold copy. The media loved Princess Diana. They caused her death to an extent. So, go figure, right? You kill that which feeds you. But yeah, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and certainly don't murder it. But anyway, they find other things to talk about now. Um, but anyway, yeah. So she died anyway. So going back to what I was saying, what happened after Princess Diana died in England? Well, there was a whole lot of hoopla in British Parliament, and the royal industrial complex, and all the movers and shakers behind the monarchy, and and the ministerial level, they all were like, "What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? The princess has died, and we've got to do something. We have to act because people need a resolution, or they need something to be done." So what did they do? They wrote into law knee-jerk legislation, and they called it the Protection from Harassment Act, 1997. Since amended 2010, I think, last time. Anyway, so the Protection from Harassment Act, and later added subsequent clauses, subsections like Section 2, non-violent, then Section 3, and via proxies, people acting on your behalf, or communications via electronic email. So, it's become a big, massive, basically it's become an industry, for lawyers. The Protection from Harassment Act has become a big, fat, money-making piece of legislation that was, over the last 30 years, has been so hugely widely interpreted in many different ways by law people who basically pass down judgments, judiciary, magistrates, judges, high court. So they have to interpret this messy piece of vague legislation that was known as the Protection from Harassment Act. And but what on this as far as our free speech goes, which is the whole point of this video. You see, this is in conjunction. This happened at a time when all of our institutions and all the machinery, basically, that runs our country, the infrastructure, right, all been basically indoctrinated by proponents of psychology and mental health. It's a rising thing. Okay, okay, go back to where it started, right? Modern psychology. So I guess the turn of the 19th century, right? So 1900. So you got, the very disturbed Nietzsche. He was dead soon into the 19th century, I'm pretty sure. And he's a guy with so many emotional problems, and he liked to write about, and but he's one of the modern fathers of modern psychology, because he looked down into his abyss, and we've all done that. And there's been times when I've looked into the abyss, and and then tried really hard not to fall in it. And anyway, jokes aside, but anyway, yeah. So he was a screw up. He was a screw up who could write down his thoughts and sometimes make sense coherently, but not always. Forget Nietzsche. So Jung, Freud, a little bit later, and they were scholars. They studied the classics, but they had their own interpretation, and so their work, their writings, they opened up the psyche, the human psyche. Well, they talked about it, feelings, and stuff, and what could be the root causes, and they did studies, and most of it was profiling, you know. So you get a group of people and you look for common things, and you look for common answers, you look for common explanations, you look at people's backgrounds, you look for all these things. Uh, it's yes, it's based in science, but it's not scientific, because we all know that psychology is not a science. Psychology is a vocation, it's a study, but it's not scientific. And that's not a fact because I'm saying it. Um, it's a fact because most of the great scientific minds have pretty much said the same thing, although these days they're too scared to challenge it. But what I'm talking about is great scientific minds, not of the last 30 years. I mean, I mean, these days you've got, well, let's think of a PhD. Right, yeah. Jordan Peterson, right? Yeah, PhD. Very clever man. Psychologist, right? Clinical psychology. That's his specialty, as well as probably something else. I don't know, the humanities. Who knows? But so he's a PhD in clinical psychology, Jordan Peterson, right? Now he talks a lot of common sense as far as I can see, and I've watched quite a lot of his lectures and read a lot of his stuff, and I take it he's not very well now. So shout out to JP. Hope you get well soon. Right? We don't need you. We don't need you off the planet right now, this moment. So please get well. But or rather, hope your friend up there's looking out for you. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with what a lot of, even though he's a psychologist, right? I agree a lot of what he says because it's common sense. But you lose me on two things, because you lose me, or rather, he loses me on two fronts. One is because he's coming at it from a vantage point of being a theologian, or of theology, religion, right? So he has many non-scientific belief. His belief system is essentially non-scientific, or his moral belief system is not scientific. And also, he is a PhD in psychology, which is a fake science. They pretend it's a science, but it's not a science. So so there's a really good article in this in one of the scientific journals. I think it's called Springer, that I read years and years ago. It stuck with me. I think it's the Springer Journal, and there was a really good piece by lots of real scientists, PhDs, who were making the case for psychology. Of course, it's non-empirical, and even the people that, obviously, since psychology has been universally classified and accepted as a science, it's not an empirical science, because an empirical science means you make um, well, you have a control, right? And a control is something which is not to do an experiment in science. The control is not uh, susceptible to change. It stays constant. That's why it's called a control, right? And it's from the control that you observe and you measure observable variances, right? They're measurable variances, and that's how you basically form scientific conclusions based upon um, measurement results. And that applies to all the sciences. I think every single one. I mean, in, for example, in physics, uh, a force, an observable force, is exerted and measured, or it isn't. In chemistry, an observable, measurable chemical reaction occurs, or it doesn't. There's nothing wishy-washy about it. You have to go into quantum physics to get to the wishy-washy. But that's probably more to do with our lack of understanding. But anyway, so the classic sciences, they're empirical, We can make measurements. We can make predictions based upon accurate measurements for all the sciences, the main ones. The classic sciences. Um, but psychology, it's not a science. The science. I mean, what is psychology? The science of your feelings, the science of the human brain. Well, no, that's biochemistry. Um, uh, you know, primarily biochemistry. Psychology is profiling, a bit like the techniques, although they're more sophisticated. The techniques that the police and investigative entities use. So they take you know, they take a group, presumably a random group of people, or a spread, you know, a metric of people, right? And they look for common prevalences, and they look for they look for repeated results. Things that they can say, well, this is a pattern, yeah. But it's very unscientific. I mean, just because they're dealing with people's responses, which could be wildly different on any given moment, any day. I mean, just think of the human brain, right? I mean, the amount of stimuli hitting the human brain every second, you know, particles passing through it for a start. And but all the senses, we've got photons going into our eyes. We've got things, I mean, the air, it's not empty. Things are touching us all the time. Things are, you know, we smell, we hear, we all bombarded with stimuli, right? So there, how do you get a control? How to make a scientific experiment in psychology? What would the control be? There is no control because there's no constant. There's no one human brain that's the same for a start. Not the biochemistry is, it's unique. Um, you're dealing with neurons, and if you know how neurons, you know, frontal lobes, medulla cortex, if you know how it works roughly, layman's, and how the brain works, you know that there is zero way that you're going to get 100% accurate, the same response to a set of variables, because you can't do it. So you can't make accurate predictions in psychology. You can't make accurate measurements. You can't. It's basically anything that the definition of a science is, and look for the definition of a science because it hasn't changed in 100 years. The definition of science is basically everything that psychology isn't. Right. So I'm gonna stop this video now because it's half an hour. It's too long. So I'm going to carry on from this point, and because I haven't finished what I want to say, and I've still got to basically connect the dots between the advent of psychology, which became very, very modern psychology, which became very, very popular in the late 50s, 60s. Uh, you know, it was it a response to the counterculture movement, the fact people started taking a lot of psychotropic drugs. I mean, who knows? But it became very popular in the 60s. And there was the great 60s liberal revolution, of course. And maybe because we wanted to set our inner selves free, express ourselves, express love, express free everything. We also wanted to set our psyches free. And a lot of pop psychologists who were obviously extolled the teachings of Freud and Jung and Nietzsche and all the big names. These people started writing books. All right, too many to name. Loads of them started writing books in the 60s. Pop psychologists, let's be honest. They were just piggybacking on on Freud's ideas, Jung's ideas, and Nietzsche. Those three names they keep cropping up, right? Because they're the only ones I can think of offhand. There's many more. Sartre. Okay, so okay, joke to self. Right. Anyway, I'm gonna do a part two of this. Okay, over and out.